Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf here. I am going solo for this episode. No Gavin today. And the Knicks lost 112 to 100 at home to the Milwaukee Bucks. The starters looked terrible. The bench looked awesome. They almost led the Knicks to another comeback. The Knicks were down by 20 plus points, and the bench did their best to almost get them all the way back there and just couldn't quite come up in the end. But lots to talk about. Small picture, big picture, whatever picture you want to talk about. I'm going to be talking about it next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. And today's episode is brought to you by McDonald's. Proudly serving community since 1965, McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. And as always, I'm loving sausage McMuffins. That's my jam. Anyway, I am Alex Wolf. I am editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, also writing about the Knicks for Clutch Points this year. And this is a loss episode of Locked On Knicks. The Knicks lose 112 to 100 to the Bucks. And I'm going to lead things off with two things that were tweeted by people that have been on this podcast before that we love very much, but that tweeted two things that basically tell the story of this game and have been telling the story of the Knicks lately. So Dan Devine, if you're not following him already, your man Devine from The Ringer, says Kemba, Fournier, RJ, Randall, Mitch has now been outscored by 64 points in 205 minutes this season, according to NBA stats, making it both the most used and worst lineup in the league thus far. Bad times. Agreed, that is terrible. And that only makes this next point even more depressing, I guess. I don't know. From Chris Herring, who you might know as at Herring_NBA. Of course, make sure to pre-order Blood in the Garden, that his new Knicks book coming out. We're going to have Gavin and I will have a review of that up at some point or another. But Herring says the most efficient five-man lineup in the NBA so far, with at least 50 minutes played, Quickley, Rose, Burks, Toppin, Gibson are plus 19.9 points per 100 possessions in 61 minutes. And according to the screenshot on his tweet, that places that grouping ahead of Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Seth Curry, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey for the Philadelphia 76ers, who are obviously one of the better teams of the NBA, despite the fact that the Knicks beat them the other day. And that was just sort of the story of this game, right? So the Knicks, the starters really struggled in this game, and Julius Randle was the only one to score in double digits with 16 points. He actually came out and was kind of carrying the offense early. Like he was basically the reason that the Knicks were in it to start this game, was because, Julius was doing his Julius thing and carrying the team and carrying the offense, making sure that there was some points going up on the board. But otherwise, across the board here, I mean, even Randall didn't end up having that great of a shooting game. 6 of 15 for 16 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist in 27 minutes. You have Kemba shooting 1 of 7 in 18 minutes for 2 points. Fournier 1 of 5 in 19 minutes for just 2 points. RJ 3 of 8 in 21 minutes for 9 points, which I guess is probably about the least egregious of any of the starters. Mitch, who, you can't necessarily count on for scoring any given night, only 3 points, 1 of 1 shooting in 23 minutes. I mean, it was every bit as pitiful as it sounds for the starters. They especially not so much in the first half. I actually give them props. They came out looking pretty good, I would say, in the first quarter. They were conceding some shots to the Bucks, but I thought that they sort of did the thing that the Knicks do or did do last year, at least, where they were sort of selectively giving up looks well enough. You know what I mean? Like they were closing in on Giannis, but it wasn't egregious. You know, they weren't doing it too much, and that was creating some open threes for the Bucks. But you kind of just play the percentages at that point, and then unfortunately the Bucks shot. I think it was like 87.5% on threes in the first quarter. I think they made like 9 of 11, maybe, or something like that. It was a lot. I mean, they made way too many threes. Um, and it was just kind of nothing you could do about it. They weren't even all wide open. Some of them were lightly contested. Some of them didn't really look like they should have just immediately splashed. But I thought that the Knicks were also generating pretty good shots. They just weren't hitting them themselves. But then, as is the case, recently the bench came in. They played pretty well, and things stayed at a reasonable level. Like the Knicks were down 9 to end the first quarter, and they wound up going into the half down 9 as well. And the bench did a pretty good job. They kind of kept things pushing along at least. And Obi Toppin didn't play a ton of time, which was frustrating as usual. Immanuel Quickley at that particular moment had not played a ton either, although he played a little more than he has recently, which was nice. But the bench did a pretty good job, and then the starters came back in and just kind of farted around and ended up going into the half tied. So, or sorry, not tied, but in the same hole that they were in at the end of the first quarter, I should say. But anyway, so then the second half rolls around, and this is where things really got ugly. And here's where I'll introduce another stat that is local to this game. So for this entire game, and I know plus minus is sometimes a flawed stat, but sometimes it also tells a pretty good story, I think. And in this game, it definitely had a story to tell, particularly because the starters played with the starters and the bench played with the bench generally in this game. And that's where this kind of narrative was woven here. So out of the starters, every single one of them finished in plus minus negative double digits. The best one was Mitchell Robinson at a minus 15 in 23 minutes. The other 4 starters, so Julius Randle, Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett, all finished negative 20 or worse in this game. Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier were negative 22 in, again, 18 and 19 minutes. Julius Randle was a negative 26 in 27 minutes, and RJ Barrett was a negative 28 in 21 minutes. So that is putrid. And conversely, the bench was every single one of them was positive. Taj Gibson was a +3 in 25 minutes of action. And then every one of the other bench players was plus double digits off the bench. So Obi Toppin was a +14 in 21 minutes. Derrick Rose a +10 in 30 minutes. Alec Burks +10 in 29 minutes. Immanuel Quickley +16, team high, in 27 minutes. And it was so apparent why. The starters came out in the third quarter and managed to take what was once a 9-point deficit, and then I think at one point gave up a 14-0 run, or it might have even been more than that, to the Bucks, allowing them to extend the lead well over 20 points. I forget exactly what the largest lead was, which I can check very quickly. Largest lead was 24 by the Bucks, which they achieved in the second half. And it was just another byproduct of just a terrible effort by the starters. Like they came out and it almost seemed like they were showing their bellies like minutes into the second half, when you should be treating that as your opportunity to make a comeback and do something on your home floor. And instead, I mean, it's getting a little annoying, if I'm being completely honest. I understand part of Kemba Walker's thing is that he's a very happy dude, and he lets that show in his play and how he is as a person. And I have nothing against Kemba Walker the person, but there is something that irks me about when a player is actively part of a team giving up an enormous lead to the opposition and then goes to the bench like smiling and laughing and having a good time. And that's exactly what Kemba did in this game. And it was kind of just seemed like the attitude of the starters in the third quarter after they fell down so big. It was like, well, that's it for this game. We'll just head to the bench, send the bench guys in, and then we'll come back in to, finish farting around later and like not win this game. And the bench said, no, we're going to try and we're going to defend and we're not going to. I mean, the thing that I alluded to in the first little bit of this when I was talking about it is that they were initially smartly, I think, sending doubles at Giannis or sometimes even triples to try to get him to make a quick decision. It was forcing some turnovers early in the game, which was good. Even if the Bucks were making some threes off of it, but then in the third quarter they were just lackadaisically doing it and not being prepared to close back out on their man. So it's leading to even more open threes and just terrible looks in general. And on top of it, they weren't even doing as good of a job defending Giannis at that point. So it kind of just led to this like situation where Giannis was playing better than he should have been, and the rest of the guys were still getting open looks and that's just never going to work. That's not a good strategy to go with. So, the starters come out, the bench comes in, and things got way better. Immanuel Quickley played like a dynamo in this game. Derrick Rose had a tough first half, came back in the second half, and it felt like he didn't miss a shot the entire time. Obi Toppin did his usual thing, just provided just a crazy amount of energy and a crazy amount of pop off the bench coming into this and just blitzing the Bucks over and over with transition opportunities and backdoor cuts for dunks and hustle plays, getting rebounds for putbacks. And he did pretty much everything that you could have asked him to do. I'm going to continue talking about the role that the bench played here in just a second, but I do just have to let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by betonline.ag. We're back and better than ever, a new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball, well, not baseball anymore, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so to continue with the effort that the bench gave, I mean, they weren't just playing harder than the starters because that was a really low bar to clear. It was that they were playing smarter too. The thing was that a lot of times, so for example, where the first string offense or sorry, first string defense was crowding Giannis and trying to get to him and overcommitting and then not closing on any shooters and thus it but even not closing in properly on Giannis even and still allowing him to. I mean, he had like an off night by his standards, but still ended up with 15 points, 15 boards, 8 assists, on 5 of 15 shooting. That's still not like the worst game of his life. So you didn't affect him that much. And he was also a team high plus 21 for the Bucks in 38 minutes. So like Giannis was doing his thing. You had to, at a certain point, just kind of trust your defenders to be able to at least handle him one-on-one a little bit. And to be fair to Mitchell Robinson, like he had some lapses in this game, which was mostly what it's been recently, where it's struggling, getting making adjustments on defense. But his one-on-one defense of Giannis was actually pretty solid. He got one kind of iffy call called against him with Giannis early, where he got called for a reach, and then it just kind of seemed like from there on, Tibbs, I don't know, maybe it was just like, let's not get Mitch in foul trouble, and decided to just throw this like double, triple, whatever team at Giannis all the time. But they were using it way too liberally, to the point where then the Bucks just knew it was coming. So they were like, oh, just give it to Giannis and then he'll kick it to someone. And that's why he ends up with 8 assists for the game, even though he didn't have his best scoring performance. But the second team defense was doing so much better. They were, Taj Gibson. I don't know how many times I can like praise this guy, but I don't know how in his mid to late 30s he's still able to like one-on-one defend Giannis Antetokounmpo, a 2-time MVP, former Defensive Player of the Year, reigning Finals MVP and champion. I mean, this guy scored 50 on the Suns in a finals game, and yet Taj Gibson on one sequence in particular in this game literally like put the clamps on Giannis twice in a row, one on one. Once, got a block on him, and then secondly, after Giannis kind of recovered the block because it was blocked softly by Taj, so Giannis got it back. Giannis takes a second to regroup himself, tries to go at Taj again, and throws up another crappy shot. And it was just, I mean, it was masterful what Taj was able to do with him to neutralize him. I think that was probably the turning point for the Knicks, because then they were able to keep guys out on shooters more, and the Bucks, right up until the very end, when the Knicks finally tired out, were not able to, keep up with what the Knicks bench guys were doing, because they were, not overcommitting to helping Giannis, which was exactly what the starters were doing. And it just was such a better strategy. And ultimately, it was why the bench then was able to make this comeback where they, make up a 20 points worth of ground and get to within 4 points of, getting back. Well, actually, it's not even that they never got there. They did tie the Bucks at one point, quickly tied with a few minutes, like I want to say like 5 minutes remaining. And then it reached a point where the Bucks were only up by like 4 with a couple minutes to go. And then there was this key moment where Obi went up for a dunk on Giannis and got blocked, but initially it was called a foul. If that would have been left as a foul, Obi gets 2 free throws, maybe gets within 2, maybe that allows the momentum to stay more. But they stop the play there, gets the guys cooled off. They review it, they turn it into a jump ball at half court. Clyde was very confused as to why the Knicks didn't load up both sides of the court and instead loaded up the defense, thinking that they were conceding the tip to the Bucks. I kind of just saw it as they were only playing it as if Obi got it behind him, but otherwise just wanted to be safe. But whatever. At any rate, the Bucks, I think at that moment got a 3 again, or at the very least scored, and then the floodgates just kind of opened. Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton made a few more threes, and then next thing you know, like yada yada yada, the Knicks lose by 12 points, and that's it for the game. But they fought so hard. I kind of wanted this for the bench, but I almost appreciate the fact that they still lost a little more as it pertains to the starters, because I hope that they realize that something has to change here, and maybe it's even a change to the starting lineup itself. Maybe sit someone down, like maybe sit down Fournier and start IQ. Honestly, maybe start IQ and Rose. Maybe sit down Kemba and Fournier and let them come off the bench for a minute and give them almost like some time to warm up and, find their groove again. But I just don't see how this is going to work, with these starters right now, because I can understand cold spells and stuff, and those happen. And there was a cold spell in this game, but they also just gave up. And, I can understand if you have an off shooting night, sure, you maybe would feel that way sometimes, but these guys are seasoned professionals. The whole reason that the Knicks brought in Kemba and Fournier was because they are guys that are, well into their careers. They're good vets. One is a 4-time All-Star. The other one has been, arguably the best player on his team a couple of times, has been a fringe All-Star for years. And Fournier, you bring these guys in because you think that they're going to give you their all at all times. And then now you're seeing where they're just kind of perfectly willing to throw in the towel and say, oh, game's over in the second or third quarter. And I just don't really think that's acceptable. At any rate, I got to take my second break here. So this episode of Locked On Knicks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. I've told the story a bunch, but over the summer, took a road trip to Lake George. Was coming home real tired, a little hungover. Best part of the trip home was stopping at McDonald's, grabbing like a McDouble and some French fries and some McNuggets, and chilling with my buds and drinking that McDonald's Coke and having that little caffeine boost to get us the rest of the way home. So head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say locked on Knicks watch party? I still haven't said it. I don't know who's saying it. I can't tell. But all I know is I'm loving it. And all right, so we're back. I figured in this last bit I could talk a little bit about maybe what we could do to change things here, right? Because I just think that there's something broken about this team right now. And I can appreciate, it's kind of good problems, right? Like the Knicks clearly have some problems, and yet via the amount of talent on the team, they're still 7-5. So that's awesome, but Derrick Rose kind of alluded to it in his post game comments, where I mean he wasn't blaming the starters. He did the good thing that a good leader and a good teammate does, and kind of made it an everybody problem. But he mentioned, like we can't come out flat. We can't keep just kind of like dawdling around. Like he finally said it. Someone had to say it. And I'm glad to know that someone at least has this amount of self-awareness. He said, we're not good enough to come out and not give 100% effort. Or I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically that. And the we're not good enough part definitely left his lips. I forget if he said, whatever after that. But basically that's the message. He knows this team is not good enough to not give 100% effort, and we've seen that they can't give 50% effort against anybody, but you definitely can't do that against the Milwaukee Bucks. And what was probably the most concerning about this game is that by and large against the good teams, the Knicks have kind of stepped up this year. It's been against the bad teams that have been the issue, where it seems like they take their foot off the gas and whatever. This game they were competitive through the first half. Really all they needed was for the Bucks to just like stop hitting like 90% of their threes and hitting really hard ones at that. And they could have made a comeback in this game, I think, fairly easily. And they could have, the starters could have started that comeback, and then the bench could have continued it, and the starters could have come back in to finish it the way that, the way that it was intended, the way that things are supposed to work. But instead, the starters just kind of came out and just rolled over. And that was it. And that was all that they cared to do. And, it's just, you can't keep having that happen and expect to have the season go well, because again, as Rose said in his post game comments, like you start doing this win loss thing, and suddenly, the season has flown by, and you're a 500 team, and you don't. This Knicks team is better than a 500 team. Last year's team was like 10 games over 500. So there's absolutely no excuse for this team that got so much better in the offseason, that has a year older Immanuel Quickley, a year older Obi Toppin, a year older RJ Barrett, year older and wiser Julius Randle. Derrick Rose coming back, still playing amazing. Taj Gibson somehow getting a year younger in the offseason. Mitchell Robinson putting all this bulk and everything. And you bring in Kemba Walker and Fournier. There's no way that this team should be worse than last year's team. So, and they're not, to be clear. You know what I mean? There is an adjustment period for all teams, especially when you add 2 new players to a starting lineup and all this stuff. As a Knicks fan, we should know this. You know what I mean? You should know, things take time. And that's why the Knicks sucked for so long, was because every single year they would bring out a whole new starting lineup. Half their bench would change. They would have no roster continuity. And that's how you had like Frank Ntilikina being far and away the longest tenured Knick last year when he was drafted in 2017. And like Kevin Knox, I think right now is the longest tenured Knick, drafted in 2018. So that's how you run into these sort of problems. Like, it is lack of continuity. So of course there's going to be an adjustment period. We're probably still going through that, but time does fly. Like, we are now, it's over an eighth of a way into the season. So, as quick as it feels like this has been so far, it's been almost pushing a month since the season started at this point. And before you know it, we're going to be at the 20 game mark, which is the quarter way mark of the season, roughly. And then pretty soon you're at the 30 game, 40 game, whatever mark. And then these things haven't fixed themselves. So how I would maybe fix some of these problems, and maybe, give the Knicks a better chance on any given night. More small ball, first off. I could not believe that of all games that the small ball lineup did not get any run in this one. And I understand Taj was playing well. I also think that Tibbs was sending a message down the stretch by not putting any starters in. So that included lumping Julius Randle into that, even though I thought Randle actually had a really good game. And like, again, it's not fair for me to rip on Julius Randle when I wasn't happy with some stuff he was doing early in the season without then pointing out like he was the only guy out of the starters that I think was really trying in this game. Like he put in good effort in the first quarter. Like he came out with some fire. He was defending really well. And he I thought was defending well enough in the second half as well. And was also the only guy trying to like really generate offense and stuff like that. And he was the only guy who was making shots. So putting him back in would not have been a bad thing to me. And the way to do it would have been putting him in small ball, because I think if there's ever any team that you could potentially do that with, it's this Bucks team, because Randall has shown in the past like he can hang with Giannis. It's not, Giannis is Giannis, so it's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but he can hang with Giannis and he can actually, I mean, he does a pretty good job when matched up one-on-one with offense when Randall is on offense. You know what I mean? So I think that was worth exploring in this game. It's definitely worth exploring more going forward. Obviously, there's some situations where you can't go small ball, but Tibbs seems to think that there are no situations where you can go small ball, and that is definitely not the case. So start doing more of that. I mean, we saw it work out of necessity in literally the first game of the season. And guess what? That was like one of the more inspiring wins the Knicks have had this year, with that, comeback and the win there using small ball and having Obi Toppin play the most minutes he's played throughout this whole year. Like, there are times when Obi and Randall are literally the two best players to touch the floor for the Knicks in any given game lately, or at least it feels that way. It's tough to completely say so because the numbers don't match with Obi, because you can't accrue numbers when you're not playing. But I mean, there are times when those two seem like the two best players to touch the floor for the Knicks. Why not put them on the floor together and just give it a shot? My God, if it really goes off the rails, like in a game like tonight, if it really went off the rails in the fourth quarter or something, who cares? I mean, at that point, you were already down 20 at one point. You're making this comeback. If you cede a few more points, you end up losing anyway. Like, the bench guys were gonna get tired regardless. So it would have been smart to at least try to insert maybe even like RJ and Randall, just to get a little bit of fresh legs out there. Maybe take out like Burks and Taj and see what you could do with Rose, IQ, and Obi along with those two. I mean, it's worth experimenting with, and it's worth trying, even if you think, if your Tibbs like, oh no, the other team has a guy that's too big for those two guys to deal with. Just give it a shot every once in a while. Maybe it'll work. Like, I think that Randall and Obi might surprise you in that regard, because Obi has looked like a really good, like, I don't want to say full rim protector, but at least a guy that has really good timing on blocks this year and can give you some little semblance of something like rim protection. Another thing that I'll potentially do to try to solve this issue right now: start Immanuel Quickley over Kemba Walker. And maybe this is not the answer that some people want to hear. Like, maybe some people want to hear Derrick Rose. That would be fine. That said, I think Derrick Rose fits a really important role for the bench, which is a creator. He pushes the pace. He is consistently getting the ball to Obi Toppin in transition. He runs pick and rolls with Taj Gibson. Whatever. He has good chemistry with that lineup. That's not to say IQ doesn't, but IQ can also, play off the ball in that starting lineup. He can, he could do that better than Kemba can, I think. And, he can make spot up threes. He's been doing that recently. He can make step back threes. He's been running really good pick and rolls lately. So he could run those with Mitch. He could run that with Randall. God forbid we ever run a pick and roll, pick and pop for Randall again after that work during preseason. And then the Knicks just decide to basically never do it again. He has good chemistry with all those guys. And he provides a sort of spark that, if you get that spark out there first thing to start the game, maybe that's the way to go. I mean, I would say just like, I still don't think the Kemba has been as bad as Peyton was at times last year. Though it's not exactly, I mean, it's bad that the thought has crossed my mind of like, oh, where are we at with Kemba after these last few games versus where we're at with Peyton? But like, something's not right with Kemba right now. So sit him down, put IQ out there, and don't make the same mistake that you made last year of having this kid in IQ who's flourishing on the bench and looks like he might be ready to take a step into the starting lineup, and then just saying no for no apparent reason, and not giving him the shot. I mean, at this point, just mix something up. Like, it feel one thing that does feel very similar to last year is that almost every single game now the Knicks are falling in a hole that they have to dig back out of. And that's counterproductive. You want to start above the other team. You want to start off good, and that's how things were starting early in the season, but they just haven't been that way since. So try something different. Put IQ out there as your starter, see how it works, and mingle him a little bit with the bench before you sub him back out or whatever. And then, maybe let Kemba Walker try to cook against bench units for a little bit and see if maybe that brings it back to where he used to be, or at least some semblance of it, because he just the last few games really has not looked good in that regard. And then the last thing, and this is all very simplistic, obviously, but stagger Randall and RJ more with the bench. I mean, I sort of alluded to that a minute ago too, talking about what I would have liked the closing lineup to be. Try that more, and that goes right along with playing more small ball, but just try different things. But RJ and Randall, I think, are your two best players. Stagger them with your other best players, the guys that have been the most consistently electric out there, and just put your two, put Randall and RJ with your most energetic players and see what happens. Because the few times that they've done it, it's gone really well this year. I think when they stagger Randall with some of the bench guys, when they stagger RJ with some of the bench guys, that worked well last year too. Do that and try to give them more of an opportunity. Stop with, Tibbs, I thought, was doing a decent job of sort of getting away from the platoon shift thing. And then now it's kind of just fallen right back into it, where he's treating these like hockey lines or something, where it's like, okay, first line, second line, you can't just have, like two starters out there and three bench guys, or vice versa. It's got to be this, like, within the course of about a minute or two, you have to completely flip the whole thing over into all bench players. And then within like a minute, when the bench guys are leaving, you make maybe two sub patterns and completely put the starters back in. It's just, that's got to change too, I think. But I don't know. The Knicks aren't in the worst place ever. They could, certainly they could be under 500 or something right now, and very easily they could be under 500. Make no freaking mistake about it. But as of right now, they're still in good shape at 7-5. So you don't want to marginalize that, but it's very obvious from how Tibbs is talking and like his post game conferences and stuff. He's gone from the guy that was, even in losses, still kind of like cracking jokes and being like, "Oh, we'll figure it out, whatever." Today he looked defeated in the press conference, and that is not par for the course for him lately. Like, he has not looked like that. He has not talked tersely like that. Like, he wants nothing to do with talking about this team right now, and that's worrisome. I think things got to change sooner than later, because you have a good thing right now, being at 7-5, and the Knicks should really like count their blessings that they are even that good. But all it takes is one bad stretch, and suddenly you're under 500. And the way that the East is looking this year, you don't want to be under 500. I think there's going to be a lot of competition. You're not going to see a situation this year where like the 7th or 8th seed is only a couple games over 500. Like, I think you're going to have to be quite a bit better. And those last two play-in spots might be a little worse in the way of records, but I think you might see like the 8th seed being a 500 team this year. So it won't be one of those situations where the Knicks can kind of hang on and be 500 for a long time and then go on a little mini winning streak and pop up to the 4 seed again this year. That's not what the East is. The East is really scrappy this year, and it seems like pretty much every team can punch you in the mouth any given night. And that's to say nothing of the West too, which is still amazing and still going to be really hard when the Knicks have to face them in a couple months, like ad nauseum. They're going to go on a lot of West Coast road trips towards the end of the season. So now's the time to figure this stuff out. You got to figure it out sooner than later. Anyway, I don't think I have too much more to say. So this has been Locked On Knicks. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to check us out on YouTube. If you have been watching on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a thumbs up and maybe even a comment, let us know, what you're thinking about the Knicks right now, what you would fix, because there's obviously many things that you can pick from right now. But definitely throw us a subscribe on YouTube, even if you don't plan on watching. It helps us out a lot to just have that, and hopefully helps our visibility so we can keep growing on a cool new platform. But at any rate, thanks so much, guys. We'll be back with at least one more episode this week, maybe two, depending on if I'm feeling frisky and I want to record another one for Friday. But if nothing else, I'll have a game recap for you guys on Saturday morning for Friday's game. And I think I have a special guest lined up. There's not going to be Gavin again, but I think I have someone to come on and co-host with me. So I will talk to you all at the very least on Saturday, maybe on Friday if something else comes up and I decide to record an episode. But until next time, guys, peace out. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you all soon.